Chip Tam and football. That's what Pittsburgh does. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another week of the show. Brian Batko from the Post-Gazette, one of our Steelers beat writers, here with you as always, or as usual. And as always, the show brought to you by Pella. No better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than from the fine folks at Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and your budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. The draft is next week. Yes, we are closing in on the NFL draft. We've still got what two Tuesdays to go here. But yeah, next week we'll really be getting close. And with that in mind, want to have on as our guest today Heather Dinich, longtime ESPN college football reporter. She's somebody who we've been having conversations about this year's quarterbacks class, for months, and it's been tied into next year's potential quarterbacks class that the Steelers could peruse when the draft is going to be held and staged right here in Pittsburgh. What's the best route for Omar Khan to take? That's been the topic of a lot of conversation. So I wanted to have on somebody who doesn't just think about these things every spring, but covers college quarterbacks year round. So I'm going to pick Heather's brain a little bit on the players in this year's group, the players that could potentially be in next year's group, and kind of see what she would do if she had to take one of these guys or choose one year over the other, and ultimately where her head would be at if she were an NFL GM in need of a quarterback of the future. So looking forward to that conversation with Heather. She will be joining me right here on the other side of Chip Tam and football. And there's our guest for today, joining us from ESPN, venerable college football writer, Heather Dinich. How's it going, Heather?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on in the Berg.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the shirt says it all, but I was even going to say here before we get into, your thoughts on the college quarterbacks this year and next year that are kind of circling the Steelers orbit. You are also a card carrying member of Steeler Nation. So that adds even another layer to this. You've got some skin in the game as a fan who can, you can be a fan of an NFL team, whereas you have to take the cold and calculating look at college sports. Why are you a Steelers fan, Heather? Let's just go ahead and start with that before I get your thoughts on the current situation.
I was born in Uniontown, Pennsylvania.
Nice.
That's why.
Okay. Yeah.
And so when I was really little, and we're talking like elementary school, I was a huge Pirates fan first and loved Roberto Clemente. And I was a huge Andy Van Slyke fan, wrote to him and all these things that kids do, Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla, Killer Bees. And my parents loved the Steelers, and that eventually trickled down to me as well. So when we moved across the state when I was in middle school, I was stuck with all these Philly fans, and it was devastating. It was an emotional, really transformation that I had to go through as a young child. But I'm back. I'm here. I'm always here.
All right. Well, with that in mind, I'm going to pick your brain on the guys in this class and potentially in next year's class. But I think from what I've seen online, you are not a pro Aaron Rodgers Steelers fan, and I guess we'll get into it, but I guess that would assume you're maybe more on board with turning the page and taking a rookie this year or next. But what kind of gives you the skepticism about Aaron Rodgers if they do ultimately go that route?
Well, there's it's twofold. And first is personality, and you don't need divisiveness in the locker room, and that's a concern because of just how controversial he can be with his comments. The other thing is, I don't know how good he's going to be. I understand he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, but and I don't care that he's 41 years old because you can still be good at that point. But with the injuries and not having played, I just wonder how good he will be. And when you have the 21st pick, to me, when you go down, if you have Aaron Rodgers, okay, you have a veteran, you have Mason Rudolph, so you have a Band-Aid is what he is. And I don't know if that Band-Aid is worth the gamble, because it's not a guarantee. And that's kind of the way I look at it. So between the uncertainty in performance and the volatile personality at times in the locker room, just in terms of causing controversy, you've already got Pickens there. How much more do you need with Metcalf in there too? And I know he was throwing with Metcalf, and that's great and everything, but I just wonder how that whole dynamic will unfold and if it's all worth it.
Yeah, I think powder keg could be a good word for all of those guys under one roof, with
Right.
one ball, of course, to go
Right.
around. So, all right, Steeler fan hat off, longtime ESPN reporter for college football hat on. Plus, you still have the Steelers shirt on, so that will play into it as well. But let's start with this year's crop of quarterbacks, Heather, because you've been covering these guys for a long time. I think here in Pittsburgh, a lot of us Steelers media are almost playing catch up on Shedeur Sanders a little, because at the beginning of the draft process, I at least went in thinking, okay, he's in the Cam Ward tier. He's not even going to be in range of the Steelers at 21 overall. Now, a lot of the draft analyst community in the plugged in NFL insiders at the national level think there is a real chance he slips to the Steelers, maybe even lower than the Steelers. What are your thoughts on Shedeur, the prospect, how we don't even have to get into Cam Ward, but how Shedeur stacks up with kind of the Jaxson Darts of the world, maybe even the Tyler Shoughs, Quinn Ewers of the world, and in this draft class that I think some people are low-key high on, and other people are saying there's just not many long-term starters in this group.
I don't think there are many long-term starters in this group, but as far as Shedeur Sanders goes, I think he is number 2 in this class behind Cam Ward. And Cam Ward was terrific at Miami. His defense was the greater issue for him. Texas Tech coach Joey McGuire told me during the season last year that Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback in the country. And if he's not the top quarterback taken, then he doesn't know what scouts are looking at. And I do think that if by some chance Shedeur is sitting there when the Steelers have the 21st pick, I think they should take him. But it also depends on what happens with Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph. But the reality is that I don't know if Shedeur hangs on to the ball too long, or if his offensive line was that bad. It got better this year. The year before that, it was one of, if not the worst in the country. And so I think there are some questions there. But when it comes to overall, I think he would be the best option. But still, I just feel like with so many needs defensively on the offensive line, at running back, if Sanders is not available, to me, you don't go to Jaxson Dart, you don't go to Tyler, you don't go to Quinn Ewers. I think there's a significant gap between Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, and the others, Will Howard included. And I don't know why people are so high on Jalen Milroe. I think he's a fantastic athlete. I think more often than not, he's the best athlete on the field. He's a fantastic runner.
Yeah.
He has such strength in his arm. He is a huge dude, and he will run you over. But he regressed as a passer. I don't know how good his intermediate throwing game really is. I don't know how good he is as a real quarterback in the NFL. He's a great runner, and like I said, can throw a deep ball. But how good of a quarterback is he remains a big question for me.
So you're not necessarily buying some of the latest buzz or rumors as we get closer to draft day that always happens with quarterbacks, where it's like, no, everything you thought you knew about Shedeur being the clear number 2, it could change, and it could be Jaxson Dart, Jalen Milroe could be a first round pick. Tyler Shough really kind of came out of nowhere. I think when you first got started digging into this, it was like, oh, Shuck's going to be a late round guy, and now you have some people pushing him up into the second round. The funny thing about this class to me is a lot of these guys were on winning programs. I mean, they're coming from Ohio State, Alabama, Mississippi. So like it's not like they're, out of left field, but maybe or Notre Dame and Riley Leonard's case, but a lot of them may be products of their supporting cast and environment. And it sounds like you are, more so in the mindset of this class is closer to that 2022 Kenny Pickett class, which we know the Steelers did a lot of homework on, but all for naught in the end.
Right. And I think you make a great point, because particularly when you look at Will Howard at Ohio State and Quinn Ewers at Texas, they were surrounded by enough NFL talent to help mask some of their deficiencies, particularly at wide receiver and on the offensive line. And, when I look at Will Howard, I think I would rank him ahead of Quinn Ewers, and I would put him as like a day two project type backup situation. But again, like, if you're talking specifically about the Steelers, there are better players that you could pick at positions of greater need ahead of him. But at that point in the draft, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good segue to next year's class, because I think part of the quarterback conundrum here with the Steelers is, okay, well, from like a sort of pipe dream perspective, the draft is going to be staged here next year. All eyes are going to be on Pittsburgh for it. It would align, all the stars would align pretty nicely if the Steelers were really looking at trying to take a big swing on a quarterback a year from now down at in front of Acrisure Stadium, and people filling the city streets and Point State Park and all of that. But are you buying that next year's group is really like that there's a big gap between the prospects next year and a lot of the guys that we just talked about? Because I'll tell you this much, Heather, like, from me following college football, not exactly year round, more from a casual viewer standpoint, I always looked at the 2026 quarterbacks class as the Nico class. And now Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee is not going to be playing at Tennessee. And even if he goes somewhere else next year and balls out, plays well, they're like, flash forward 10 months, everybody's going to be questioning the off-field stuff with him. And he quit on a team and he caused, which was basically has been the biggest NIL dispute thus far in the history of college athletics. What do you make of next year's group? And if you want to single out some guys or discuss Nico at all, the floor is yours.
Well, I do think that there's a lot of talent in this year's class, but I also think it's a huge year for all of them to improve their draft stock. Like, I talked to an NFL scout about Drew Allar at Penn State, and
Sure.
I think the line that he used was cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of room to grow there. I mean, when you play in a college football playoff game and there are no passes completed to a true wide receiver, you're kind of like, huh.
Yeah, I mean, that was partly an indictment of Penn State's receivers, but it can't be all of that. And I'm glad you bring up Aller because, I mean, I know a lot of our viewers, Steelers Nation is nationwide and worldwide, but I'm sure a vast group of them too are also in Pittsburgh or in Western PA or
Yeah.
Penn State fans who watch Drew Aller every week and are maybe in that he's been good but not great camp. And obviously, he must have heard some of the same feedback because he could have come out this year, but he did not. He went back to State College.
Right. And to his credit, and Penn State, they had Tyler Warren, the best tight end in the country. And they've got this year, I expect Aller to take a huge step forward, both in his play. I think the wide receivers are going to be better. And I think there are tight ends who are waiting in the wings who are, I'm not going to say as good because he was certainly special, but they've got players. And he'll have better talent surrounding him. So I think he's an example of a guy who has upside, who can improve his draft stock. Would I say he's the answer right now? No, he's not. But again, what can he do this year? When you look at Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, him coming back made LSU a college football playoff contender. And his decision to come back has them in the mix for the SEC championship. The Nico Iamaleava story is surreal. And
Right,
it's
dominating your life right now to a large extent, I would imagine.
yeah,
Because I emailed you to come on the show last week, and then all what broke loose with
yeah.
the sport you cover over the weekend. So
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's never, we always said there's never an off season, but there's truly no off season. And when you have the national championship being played on January 20th or 21st, and then spring ball starts 2 months later, the runway is even shorter of
yeah,
time off. But yeah, that is really unfortunate for Tennessee and those fans. But it also goes to show that they need to fix this transfer portal window in the spring, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. But all that being said, LaNorris Sellers at South Carolina is another one to watch, and we didn't even mention the name Manning. And
I
when you
know. I was
have
gonna say, yeah, the Nico class. I'm sure somebody was screaming through the screen. No, it's always been the Arch class. So
right, right. So there's Arch Manning taking over at Texas. And I think everybody just needs to take a breath there with him and let him go through the learning curve that all quarterbacks do. I mean,
yeah.
you would expect him to be a fantastic player, and I think he will be. But I also just think let him make his name for himself, type thing, and give him some time to learn and fail and grow from that as well. So those are some at the top of my head right off the bat. Oh, DJ Lagway at Florida. If he can stay healthy, keep an eye on him because he might be better than all of them. Florida has the toughest schedule in the country again. And he was a huge reason why Florida got back on the right track last year. That he was dealing with, I want to say, a shoulder. I'm not sure how serious that really is. But if they can protect him and keep him healthy and their defense gets better, Florida's a team that might surprise some people in the SEC. But again, that schedule is really difficult. So
And he was
I
a
don't,
true freshman, right? So he's still
yeah,
a couple years. Like he would be like a down the road prospect to know in the quarterback realm. Although nowadays, who knows what players are going to do to try to go pro when they want to or be eligible when they want to. And I also always looked at that. Well, geez, this makes me feel. I guess it would be the 2027 NFL draft class as the Nebraska guy, the Patrick Mahomes Jr., Dylan Raiola. Like I always thought he was kind of the big name in that class, but yeah, Lagway seems like he is going to be one of those Trevor Lawrence types or Caleb Williams that we're projecting 2 and 3 years out. Like he's number one pick material.
right. But you're right. This is going to be his sophomore season. Cade Klubnik at Clemson came
Oh,
back.
Pitt fans watching know that he broke their heart last year on the that
Oh,
long touchdown run that he had to beat Pitt when they were frisky with Clemson. Yeah, he was a big time recruit as well, wasn't he?
he was, but I feel like last year he finally started to turn the corner of living up to the hype and expectations that he had when he was a recruit. And I would expect him to, like Drew Allar, be another QB who takes a significant step forward this year. Also, because it's going to be his third season with Garrett Riley, his offensive coordinator, Lincoln Riley's brother. So he's another one to keep an eye on. But look, all that is to say, I they're all great quarterbacks, but I don't know. You're right. There's a ton of hype around the class itself, but how much better is it than this year's? I don't know the answer to that, but I think all of those QBs over the course of this season can certainly increase their stock and value for sure.
Yeah, like every year it remains to be seen. I'm just thinking of, 2 or 3 years ago, I guess. A lot of people at this time were like, oh, if Caleb Williams and Drake May were in this draft, they would be number 1 and 2. But it doesn't seem like it's quite that cut and dried with next
Right.
year. You mentioned LaNorris Sellers from South Carolina. I always enjoyed watching him when I would stumble upon one of their games on a random Saturday if I was on the road in a hotel room, and I was like, this guy is very fun. And then I've seen some of the highlights clips going around on social media this offseason, and he's almost got some, not to be blasphemous, but the way he shakes off tacklers in the pocket and keeps his eyes downfield, it's almost Big Ben esque with his frame and how physical he plays the position.
Yeah, he's a rumbler, and you're right. He's very fun to watch. He's got some magic, and it's just so tough to play in the SEC. It really is, and I know people hear that all the time, but I mean, I don't have their schedule in front of me. But they've got to play Clemson at the end, so that's going to be a great showdown between Sellers and Klubnik in the rivalry game. But I think that he's certainly one that is already high on some people's draft boards for sure.
Plus, you never know, some of these guys who were redshirt freshmen last year and are finally getting a crack to start it. Ohio State or Oregon or Notre Dame or wherever that might be, maybe they burst onto the scene with kind of a one hit wonder type of season, but play themselves into the draft conversation. It's really hard, and I feel like I always enjoy when people discuss it this way, but it's also impossible to know of like where would Shedeur be in next year's class, or where would Drew Allar be in this year's class. I guess that one's a little bit easier to project because some people could say, well, if he would have come out this year right now, he would have been in contention to be the second quarterback off the board. I'm just a little skeptical of that because I feel like if that were the case, he would have left school and we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Right. I would have ranked him lower than that. I just thought there were some mistakes that I saw this year that I know he would want to have back, and he's probably the first person who would admit that he's got some room to grow for sure. But don't forget, he's also going to be in his second season with Andy Kotelnicki, their offensive coordinator, and
Yeah.
their offensive line is going to be really good. I know Pitt fans don't want to hear it, but Penn State might be the king of the state in terms of a chance to win the Big Ten this year. I think they're going to be really good.
Yeah, I mean, hey, they finally broke through last year with the expanded playoff, but then obviously it did not end the way that they wanted. Well, all right, I really enjoyed this, Heather. Is there anything else you want to add before I get you out of here, or anything you want to promote or throw out there for our Steelers viewers here?
Not really. If you want to follow me on Instagram at CFB Heather, Twitter at CFB Heather, you can follow me there. Every now and then you'll see the bag over my face during Steelers season. Depending on how it goes. But I love Mike Tomlin. Like, I just want the heat off of that guy because to be able to continue to win as consistently as he has with the mess at quarterback that he's had, um, he's not the problem.
I think fixing the mess at quarterback, whether that's his doing or Omar Khan or Arthur Smith or all of the above, is going to go the longest way toward bringing that Tomlin approval rating back up if he can do that. So that yeah, that'll be interesting. And the last point I'll make, we talked about Shedeur at the beginning. I've heard some people speculate, well, what NFL team would want to kind of get into the Sanders family business here and deal with the drama, the distractions, the sideshow of all the cameras that'll be on Shador, which really isn't entirely his fault. I mean, that's just baked into his life at this point. But also Dion kind of looming and lurking and looking over everybody's shoulder. And I mean, people ask that rhetorically, but I feel like I have a definitive answer, and it would be the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. Like they've kind of seen it all and done it all with potential headache-inducing situations. I'm not saying it would work out. I'm just saying I feel like they are an organization that, rightly or wrongly, would at least feel confident in having the appetite to maybe take that on.
Well, and look, if you're giving me the choice between Aaron Rodgers saga and drama and Sanders family drama, I'll take B. Okay.
I hear you. There's probably
Yeah.
more upside there.
Well, and there's you're talking about the future. Like I said, the Aaron Rodgers thing, and everyone knows this is a band-aid, right? It's a 1 year thing, and that's not the answer. So find a young QB that you can invest in and develop, and if the Sanders family is it, then so be it. I also think Jaxson Dart is a good quarterback, but I know there's some questions about his arm size and being in a one read offense. But I think he's another QB with at least potential to get better.
And let me let you go on this then. Put on you're the GM of the Steelers now. You can dictate the future of your favorite NFL franchise. Taking Cam Ward out of the equation, of all quarterbacks who have not yet played a snap of professional football, in a vacuum, you don't know where you're getting them in the draft. Who would you want to entrust as the franchise quarterback of the future in Pittsburgh?
Oh man, if if Sanders is available, I take him. Um, and if he's not available at 21, I'm going to go with Kenneth Grant, a defensive lineman at Michigan.
Oh, so
Uh,
you'll just skip quarterback entirely and just say no. We've got to rebuild on the D line.
yeah, and then
Worry about that later.
yeah, and then I would take Dart or Will Howard with the next
Okay.
pick probably.
Gotcha. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Heather Dinich of ESPN, longtime college football reporter. Really appreciate your perspective, and hope you enjoy the draft, and hope everything is relatively keeping you sane with all this NIL drama in college football. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Good thing. See you, Heather.
Yeah.
All right, and thanks to you all for checking out another episode of the show here. Thought that was great with her. She's very well versed in what's going on in college football, and particularly with the quarterbacks, who she spends a lot of ink and, and time on every single season. And like she said, no off season, January to December, year in and year out. Appreciate you checking out Chipped Ham and Football. Before we go, quick word from Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For more than 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. Draft content is ramping up here at the Post-Gazette. We've been doing it for months, but kind of reaching a fever pitch now that we are almost a week out. So stay tuned for all the latest from me, Jerry Dulac, Ray Fittipaldo, Chris Carter, more North Shore Drive podcast to come, mock draft tracker videos with Adam Bittner steering the ship there. Appreciate you finding the show. As always, I'm Brian Batko. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.